Thank you, Christine. That was a wonderful, wonderful greeting. Good morning. Oh, and welcome to First Parish in Concord. It's so wonderful to see you all here this morning. My name is Beth Norton. My pronouns are she and her, and I serve here as the Director of Music Ministry. First Parish is a member of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, and love lies at the center of our faith. We covenant to transform and grow spiritually and ethically as we adapt to a changing world. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great web of life. And in this congregation, we affirm that Black lives matter as we embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. We are so pleased to welcome you, both in person and online this morning. This is the first of two services we are hosting here as part of the Summer 2025 Consortium of UU congregations, including First Parish in Concord, Bedford, Lexington, Lincoln, and Waltham. And I see people from all of those congregations here today. The consortium schedule can be found on our website, and there are also printed copies in your order of service along with our announcements for this week. We also especially welcome those of you who are here visiting in Concord for the annual gathering of the Thoreau Society. Welcome. Whatever brought you here today, whether in person or online, we are so glad that you have come. We welcome families who have come with children, and for those who wish to stay in the service of whatever age, soul work materials are available back in the entrance to the sanctuary. These are small crafts and coloring pages, and they can be helpful to people of all ages to calm the body and focus the mind. So feel free to help yourself to one of those. An alternative during worship is to go to the parlor downstairs, which serves as our wiggle room. And it's down in this corner of the base of the lower level and can be reached down these stairs or through the back stairs and down the hall. We have childcare providers there to look after young children while grown-ups attend the service, or parents or caregivers may stay with the children and view the service there as we send the live stream down to that room as well. So those are some options if you get wiggly. I am pleased to welcome the Reverend Dr. Jim Sherblum as our worship leader this morning. Welcome, Jim. Jim and his wife, Loretta, have been members of First Parish in Concord for nearly 40 years, having raised their children in this community. Jim was ordained here in 2004 and served as co-senior minister for over a decade for First Parish in Brookline. Jim is a transcendentalist and a longtime member of the Thoreau Society. We also are very happy to welcome our musicians today, Christine Hogan at the organ, and our resident a cappella group, the Concords. Welcome. It's great to hear you this morning. Just a couple of quick announcements. I want to draw your attention on the announcements to the fact that there's a WPA flea market here next Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. You can see the details here. If you have questions about First Parish, our governing board rep today is Gib Metcalf, who is right there. And you're welcome to find him after the service and ask him lots of questions. He knows a lot. And please join us after the service for the social hour in the parish hall downstairs. Again, you can reach it down these stairs. There's an elevator right here that will take you down as well. And if you need help with anything, assisted listening devices, finding those packets I talked about, or directions, see one of our greeters at the back. They also may have some of these, which are a wonderful thing as the sun is now coming out, I realize. So please help yourself to a fan. And I think that's it for the announcements. So let us begin our worship together by singing hymn number 134, Our World is One World.
can't imagine how glorious it is for me to see this congregation gathered here this morning. There's a piece of me as a historian that remembers every time I'm in this historic pulpit that we have a long traditions of resistance to oppression. So the reason why we put the tagline at the front for this morning only, First Parish in Concord, resisting oppression since 1775. Which in fact is an understatement. It's easy in times of great anxiety to feel helpless. So my hope this morning is that we will figure out together how do we go forth and renew our commitment to this church, to this country, to this world in a way that's driven by the core culture in Unitarian Universalism, which is love. And so I turn to Margaret Mead in the back of the gray hymnal because in times of anxiety, she has this to say: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." I reached back, and I'll ask you to look in your order of service for the responsive chalice lighting. And this one was written by Paul Sawyer when he was here as a ministerial intern under Gary Smith's ministry, and it's one I particularly love. So please join me in saying, "O flame of our faith, open our hearts and fill our bodies with persistent strength. Light our spirits and engage us deeply in this life of ours, the sacred, essential moment now." In honor of Henry's birthday this weekend, since he wrote a lot about civil disobedience, I went back to his primary lecture on civil disobedience, from 1849, and a lot of his language was appropriate to 1849 and no longer appropriate here. So with the support of the Thoreau Society, I'm going to suggest so we degender Henry so you can all hear him the way I think he would speak today. All people recognize the right of revolution. That is, the right to refuse allegiance to and to resist the government when its tyranny or its inefficiency are great and unendurable. But almost all say that such is not the case now. This is 1849. But such was the case, they think, in an earlier period, in the Revolution of 1775. If one were to tell me that this was a bad government because it taxed and tariffed certain foreign commodities brought to its ports, it is most probable that I would not make any ado about it, for I can live without those things. But when a sixth of the resident population is oppressed, in a nation which is undertaken to be the refuge of liberty, and a whole country subjected to military law, I think that is not too soon for honest men to rebel and revolutionize.
Wow. This is the time in our service when our congregation offers financial support to the church and to organizations in the community that reflect our UU values. This summer, the congregations of the UU Consortium have agreed that 100% of the offering collected each Sunday will go to support the Pink Haven Coalition, a collective of organizations and individuals who are committed to growing community defense, mutual aid, relocation services, and gender-affirming care for trans and non-binary folks. Their safety is undermined and threatened by the current U.S. political and social climate. Centering the security of the trans organizers leading this work, they gather supporters from a wide array of communities and organizations, including our UU Service Committee. I invite you to give generously. There is a text to the plate number that will appear on the screen, has appeared on the screen, if you wish to use that avenue. And now we gratefully accept today's offering.
Now, Henry was a very proud nonconformist. So even when he thought social justice demanded something, he said we needed to respond only out of our authentic selves. And so his second proviso in his essay on civil disobedience, he says this: "It is not a citizen's duty as a matter of course to devote ourselves to the eradication of any, even the most enormous wrong. We may still properly have other concerns to engage us, but it is our duty at least to wash our hands of collusion with the great injustice. And if we give it no thought longer, not to give it practically our implicit support. If I devote myself to other pursuits and contemplations, I must first see, at least, that I do not pursue them sitting on the backs of misfortunes of the oppressed. The authority of government, to be strictly just, it must have the sanction and consent of the governed. It can have no pure right over my person and property, but what I concede to it. The progress from an absolute to a limited monarchy to a democracy is a progress toward a true respect for the individual." And this ends our reading from Henry. We have a tradition here of varying how we do a time of meditation. What I'm going to offer today is that I will lift up some parish concerns, give you a chance to add any names you would like to for that, and then ask you to indulge me in a responsive meditation, which I'm calling a namaste meditation, where I will add additional names and people and ask you to respond with the light in you, recognizing and honoring the light in them, hence the word namaste, by just responding with namaste. And then we will have a time of silence to consider what has been raised, and then we will sing, end with Spirit of Life. So to begin with the parish concerns, Kathleen Maloney is at Dana-Farber for another round of cancer treatment. She hopes to be home soon and notes, "I'm very, very lucky that I have family and friends to help me get through this." She welcomes cards sent to her home at this time. And Lois Suarez is at home following several hospitalizations this summer. She would appreciate receiving cards, jokes, and particularly humor from the congregation. I invite you to lift up in a spirit of prayer anyone you would like to today, either because of significant joys or sorrows, so we hold them in the bosom of this congregation. So I ask you now to respond responsibly with namaste. We seek blessings of peace and love for all those gathered here. Namaste. We seek blessings of peace and love for all that we do love. Namaste. And also for all those who we find we cannot love. Namaste. We seek peace and love for all sentient beings on earth. Namaste. Spirit of life, help us ponder in silence now what such love means. And even those names I did not dare mention this morning because I wasn't sure you'd respond. So Amen. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organized powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established shall not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind is more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new gods for their future security. That, of course, is the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. But this wasn't Concord's first cultural revolution. That would have been the Puritan theocracy created in the 1630s on indigenous people's homelands. Another one followed 45 years later in 1676, following King Philip's War, when the United New England colonies hunted down and nearly eliminated the indigenous presence in Massachusetts east of the Connecticut River. The Declaration of Independence was issued in 1776, approximately 100 years later, to justify the American Revolution against the British Empire. Thomas Jefferson envisioned a nation of small farmers governed by a land-owning educated elite supported by human slavery. However, it was less than another 100 years before the American Civil War brought about another major cultural revolution. This was followed by the cultural revolution we now describe as the American Gilded Age from 1865 to 1930, as America industrialized, drawing immigrants from around the world to grow America's economy to one of the largest in the world. We've been here before. The Great Depression brought Roosevelt's New Deal, which was perhaps America's most substantial cultural revolution amid the rise of the nativist American First Movement and the Communist Scare. The Cold War led to America taking on the role as a world policeman. The protests for civil rights, the Vietnam protests, and Watergate scarred my generation. 50 years later, we find ourselves once again living in a deeply divided country in the middle of a cultural revolution. No one knows how this one will turn out. Though we cannot afford, as a country, to be long divided, we must reawaken a sense of a nation devoted to unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for everyone resident in the United States of America. This is the heart and soul of the American dream. Yet the American dream has been threatened many times in many ways over the last 250 years. In the 20th century alone, we saw Woodrow Wilson bring Jim Crow discrimination into the White House for the first time, followed by the Chinese Exclusion Act. President Eisenhower launched Operation Wetback in the 1950s to ship millions of people of Mexican descent, many of whom had U.S. citizenship, back to Mexico. I was 8 years old when they assassinated President Kennedy, a teenager when they killed Martin Luther King Jr., and then slayed Bobby Kennedy because he was the leading Democratic contender for the presidency. However, are things really that bad? I believe today's level of social conformity, cancel culture, alienation, oppression, and exploitation meet even Thomas Jefferson's standard to justify a cultural revolution. Forced conformity through our sources of biased information and social pressure to defend a particular worldview means most of us hear our views only in an echo chamber. When we cannot even agree on the facts of a matter, it makes agreeing on an appropriate response nearly impossible. Dueling elites and institutions shape our perception of reality and our worldviews. Such diverse worldviews result in irreconcilable political differences. It's not that one of us is right and the other wrong. It's that none of us are able to discern common ground from which to make appropriate and empowering decisions for all Americans. As to alienation, oppression, and exploitation, The social scientist Sean Cabot, in his article called Love and Revolution, says, in concrete terms, oppression refers to the political, economic, social, and cultural means that privileged people and groups use to dominate others without such means, while exploitation refers to the widening gap between rich and poor caused by disparities in income and wealth. Alienation, in contrast, expresses how these forms of social injustice undermine our very personalities, as well as our abilities to lead meaningful and productive lives, end of quote. Despite having one of the world's highest per capita gross national products, too many Americans feel they cannot make ends meet. Despair and suicide rates, especially among young alienated men, continue to rise. Reported clinical anxiety and depression are reaching levels seldom seen except in societies experiencing a civil war. Disparities in terms of wealth, income, longevity, and life choices haven't been this high since the Gilded Age of unconstrained capitalism. Confidence in our public servants, especially our police forces and immigration officials, has never been lower. This isn't simply a problem of who is currently president or particular government policies, but rather it is an existential crisis over who owns the American dream and how to fairly deploy our limited financial resources for all Americans. We can learn from America's previous cultural revolutions, or those in France, England, India, Italy, Germany, China, or South Africa. Some have been bloodier than others, but all have included substantial shifts in power and resources. Given the level of violence in American society and rapidly rising rates of attacks on public officials, I'm afraid we are headed for a particularly violent revolution unless Americans adopt the nonviolent tactics of Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and Desmond Tutu. Gandhi developed his views on love and revolution in response to the structures of oppression, alienation, and exploitation that the British Empire employed to keep order in a country where Indians far outnumbered their British overlords. Gandhi focused upon truth-seeking, which in Sanskrit is satya. In a time when people had violently different worldviews, satya was the way to try and find a common understanding, and action based on the refusal to do harm, which in Sanskrit is ahimsa, which is in English we call nonviolence. Recognizing that different people hold on to different truths encourage us to listen to each other much more closely, not trying to find holes in each other's arguments, but rather in seeking an understanding of each other's truths to find a common ground. Our means of seeking social justice must be moral, nonviolent, and as loving as possible. To truly be as one, we must love one another. What happens to any one of us affects all of us. Martin Luther King Jr. translated Gandhi's Hindu path into an American Christian setting. He wrote, quote, "I think the first reason that we should love our enemies is hate only intensifies the existence of hate and evil in the universe. There's another reason why you should love your enemies, and that is because hate distorts the personality of the hater. For the person who hates, the true becomes false, and the false becomes true. Now the final reason is this, that love has within it a redemptive power." End of quote. He rests in the power of love. King continues, "Of course you may say this is not practical. Life is a matter of getting even, of hitting back, of dog eat dog. Maybe in some distant utopia you say that idea will work, but not in the hard, cold world in which we live. My only answer is that mankind has followed the so-called practical way for a long time now, and it has led inexorably to deeper confusion and chaos. For the salvation of our nation and the salvation of mankind, we must follow another way. This does not mean that we abandon our militant efforts. With every ounce of our energy, we must continue to rid our nation of injustice. But we need not, in the process, relinquish our privilege and obligation to love one another." End of quote. King, as we know, gave his life for this cause. As a social activist, I was taught to think globally and act locally. Collectively, we are capable of creating meaningful public spaces of hope. We need a space for dialogue, for laughter, for sharing our humanity. In a world where alienation is rampant, we need to reinforce our sense of belonging, of our common humanity, and our need to have friends. Making friends across political divides can be a good first step towards common understanding. So this coming September, the Wright Tavern Center for Civic Engagement will begin to offer monthly gatherings never more than a few dozen people at a time, to explore meaning-making and finding common ground across all of our differences. A dozen years ago, I spent part of my sabbatical with Sufis in Turkey, learning to find a healthy balance in the middle of chaos. The way they do it is through whirling until you can move to a meditative state. I never got very good at whirling, but I tried. But I did learn to dance, and that getting out of your head and into your body can help you to be grounded and balanced. There's a phrase that I've always loved, and I find it attributed to lots of different authors at different times. A revolution without dancing is not worth having. But I want to encourage you to go deeper. The 14th century Sufi mystic, Rumi, whose mosque we were dancing in one night, took it to its logical extreme. He said, "Dance when you're afraid. Dance when you're heartbroken. Dance in the middle of the fighting. Dance in your blood if you must. And then dance when you are free." So he calls us, as each of the proud people who are grounded in reality do in times of revolution, which is, yes, we need to fight for what's right, but we need to find time to laugh and dance. In 10 years, Concord will celebrate its 400th birthday, and I hope and trust this particular cultural revolution will be long behind us. But what kind of Concord will we leave to generations X, Y, Z, and I'm told now the new one's Alpha? How we behave in this time of crisis will greatly shape the possibilities for their lives. What kind of world will we leave to them? What stories will we be able to tell them about how we rose to meet today's crisis? I was telling a friend the other day that as a historian, I often wondered how I would have dealt with the various cultural revolutions that we were studying, and now I can see for myself. I will be dancing, for love and joy will be at the center of my revolution. Blessed be, and please know that I love you all dearly. given that I was at that stage of life where everything seems new when Kent State happened, when I thought about these things, I thought, oh, I've got to end with Neil Young. Because after President Nixon called out the National Guard to a peaceful anti-Vietnam protest at Kent State, and they killed 4 protesters, Neil Young wrote his call to revolution against an oppressive government in his song, Ohio, which, as some of you will remember, begins, "Tin soldiers and Nixon coming, we're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming, 4 dead in Ohio." But when he sang this song in concert, he always paused before he sang it, and he said, if we can't do this with love in our hearts and joy in our movement, we have no right to do it at all. So I invite you all, as you're willing and able in body or spirit, to join the revolution, standing together rank by rank to reawaken a nation devoted to unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for everyone resident in the United States of America. And to seal it true, I invite you to rise as you're able and sing our closing hymn, number 358, Rank by Rank. Closing benediction that we will say in unison, and I invite you to remain standing as we do so. Go out into the world in peace, have courage, hold on to what is good, return to no person evil for evil, strengthen faith heart, support the weak, help the suffering, honor all beings. Please remain seated for the postlude.